Well, welcome, and thank you all for coming out during finals week for our last faculty colloquium of 2023. We are going to learn a little bit about digital storytelling and the benefits and challenges of introducing it as a teaching tool in a university classroom. Our presenters are Dr. Jennifer Slinkard, who is an assistant professor of English writing and core director at Eastern Oregon University. She primarily teaches the Gateway Seminar, First Year Writing, and Introduction to Applied Linguistics courses. Her interest in digital storytelling stems from her work in language and identity, engaging writing pedagogies and critical reflection, as well as a resistance to letting her technophobia win. The tech phobia. We had a debate about whether tech phobia or technophobia was correct. Technophobia, she feared, would be a fear of a style of music. Which she wants it on record. She is not afraid of techno. She rather likes it. The project reported on here was her second time assigning a digital storytelling project. Our other presenter is Dr. Aaron Thornburg. He's been on the anthropology faculty at EOU since fall of 2013. He is a co-editor of the collection Deep Stories, Practicing, Teaching, and Learning Anthropology with Digital Storytelling, co-author with Mariela Nunez-Janes and Angela Booker. He uses the methods of visual ethnography and digital storytelling practice in both his research and teaching. He's completed a number of local and international visual ethnography projects, including the LeGrand Life and Documenting Dublin projects, utilizing digital storytelling practices. And he regularly teaches Anthropology 357, which is Media, Self, and Society, in which digital storytelling assignments are completed by students. Please welcome our speakers.
Yes, hello everybody. Welcome to Thursday of finals week. So I'm Dr. Jennifer Slinkard, and thanks to Steve for the very kind introduction. And Aaron?
Yes, I'm Dr. Aaron Thornburg, and I want to thank you all for showing up in what I'm sure is a very busy time of the term. So we appreciate that. Our presentation today is entitled The Instructional Value of Digital Storytelling with WeVideo, Fostering Creativity in Lower and Upper Division Courses.
And also I just want to thank briefly the folks who are joining us online as well. So thanks for being here. Whoa. Okay, so here is an overview of our presentation. We're going to start with a general introduction to digital storytelling and its affordances, and then we'll describe the software that we used, WeVideo, as well as our classes and how we used the digital storytelling assignments in our class. Then we will go over the data that we collected from students, for which we had IRB approval before we collect the data. We'll go over some of the ways that we collected the data as well as what the students said about WeVideo. We'll show some select projects and then conclude with our take on the projects as well as an invitation for discussion. So what is digital storytelling? You may have heard of it before, or it might be completely new to you. This is a brief definition that we found on Wikipedia, my favorite source in first year writing. Digital storytelling is a short form of digital media production that allows everyday people to create and share their stories online. So it's a multimodal way of telling stories and recording them. Okay, so yeah, why did we want to incorporate digital storytelling? The affordances of this, I think there are many affordances of digital storytelling. It can help students see the value in storytelling and learn effective principles of storytelling. It also gives them the opportunity to learn and practice digital and media literacy skills, as well as informational literacy and ethical use of sources. it allows them to explore content of our courses and communicate their understandings of that content. They can integrate storytelling with critical thinking skills, which I really practiced in my class, as well as leveraging imagination and creativity. It helps the students to see themselves as viewers and evaluators. They're creating real artifacts that might potentially have real, authentic audiences in addition to the audience of the instructor and their peers. And it can help them understand, because of that, audience bias and persuasion techniques.
Just a little addition, that discussion was from James Oler's book, Digital Storytelling in the Classroom. We have the 2008 version of that in the library, and the 2013 is available online. So if anybody's interested in kind of thinking a little bit more about digital storytelling, that's a great resource. And so all of those kind of affordances came from Oler's book. Okay. What I think, and I think what we collectively think, is one of the really beneficial outcomes of using digital storytelling is helping to perpetuate creativity in our students. What I have here, the blue triangle that you see behind me, is Bloom's taxonomy, and I assume that many of you are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. You will note here that there are not actually creativity listed. In the original 1956 version of Bloom's taxonomy, evaluation was the highest kind of cognitive process. But in the 2001 revision of Bloom's taxonomy by Lauren Anderson and colleagues, they actually put create or creativity at the top, right? Allowing our students to create things and thereby think about them, learn about them, and actually utilize them in real ways. Going on about that creativity or the create process, Anderson and colleagues say, create involves putting elements together to form a coherent or functional whole. Objectives classified as create have students make a new product by mentally reorganizing some elements or parts into a pattern or structure not clearly present before. The processes involved in create are generally coordinated with the student's previous learning experiences. And this, I think, is kind of important when it comes to digital storytelling. Although create requires creative thinking on the part of the students, this is not completely free creative expression, unconstrained by the demands of the learning task or situation. And so one of the things that digital storytelling does is it actually puts those kind of outer borders, those constraints on the creativity, which, as we'll talk about a little bit more in our discussion, actually helps for assessment and things like that. Okay, what is WeVideo? WeVideo is not a software, but it's a software as a service. It's up in the cloud. And so it's accessible if you have a computer that has internet access, Wi-Fi accessible laptops, even iPads and phones. You can do the functions on WeVideo, importing elements, assets to the database, and then editing them on a storyboard into a complete video project. It also allows collaboration. If somebody has a project, they can actually allow collaborators, even if that collaborator isn't in person with them at the same time. And so one of the things that we thought was this might be really, really useful for our online students, so that students could collaborate even if they were physically quite distant. One of the things that we'll talk about a little bit based on our prior experience of digital storytelling is it can be really, really hard sometimes to have consistency of interface. That is, the interface that the students are working on in order to do digital storytelling can be variable, even if they're using, say, a computer lab and we have all of the materials on the, all of the software on these computer labs. Sometimes you end up with different versions of editing software. Sometimes updates haven't been done, which allow or disallow certain things to be done. And so we were thinking that WeVideo might be a good software as a service to use because it would allow for that kind of consistency of the interface. And as a result of that, it makes it a little bit easier to assess and to grade from one project to another because you know that the students are working kind of from the same starting point. That was our thinking anyway.
Yeah, so we're gonna, I'm gonna start with my class. I taught a Humanities 114 class called Global Perspectives of American Language and Culture. It's a 4-credit lower division gateway class made up of, it was originally designed for international students, but it did not just have international students in the class. And Aaron taught Anthropology 310, a special topics course entitled Passion, People, Places, Practices in Pictures. Really nice alliteration, Aaron, which was a 3-credit upper division elective course. So in my class, I focused on global perspectives of American language and culture. So the images you can see over here are some of the things that we did in the class. We had a text, How to Hide an Empire by Daniel Immerwahr, that we read throughout about 8 weeks of the course. We really broke it up and covered the entire text. We did some poetry reading where we read I Hear America Singing, and then we read Langston Hughes' response to that, I Too, and then we read Allison Adele Hedge Cook, America, I Sing You Back, to get a broad perspective of American language and culture. We also read some excerpts from Aguinaldo's case against the United States, which details the United States colonialism in the Philippines. And we took a field trip to the Temasclict Cultural Institute over in Pendleton, yeah, among other things. So that course is a contrastive culture class. It carries Gateway, Aesthetics and Humanities, and DPD credit. We really focused on connecting our local situation with the global, how we individually are tied to things that are happening outside of our immediate experience, considering multiple perspectives on America, American history and culture, especially this idea of empire. And so we had weekly readings and short essays were the bulk of our class, and then it culminated in the digital storytelling at the end.
As Jenny said, my class was an upper division elective class, 3 credits, meeting Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings for 1 hour. And it was really focused on digital storytelling production techniques with the idea that students would be coming to the class with some sort of passion, group, places, practice that they wanted to share in a digital format. And so it was kind of a workshop class that allowed them to practice the skills needed in order to turn that passion project into a digital story. We had weekly kind of topics, and there's another slide a little bit further down where we'll talk about some of these topics. And so they were thinking about, how does this apply to a project that I am planning on making? I have here a picture of Joe Lambert's digital storytelling, capturing lives, creating community. This is a resource that we used in the class extensively, and it used to be called the Digital Storytelling Cookbook. So it really is kind of a very practical thing on how to form an idea, how to develop that idea, and various things that go into it. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner of the book, it says Center for Digital Storytelling. Joe Lambert is the director of what used to be called the Center for Digital Storytelling, which is now called the Story Center. And this little smiling camera that I had was a little logo that I used in order to make cohesive the Canvas shell that I had, and also the WeVideo shell that we had, where we would have WeVideo assignments in WeVideo. And so that was like a constant theme between those two.
So the way that I incorporated the digital storytelling into my class was each week usually on Thursday, so it was a 4-credit class, we met 4 days a week. So usually on Thursdays, we spent time on our digital storytelling project. We started with a mini video where students created an introduction just so they could practice using WeVideo and figure out where the challenges were going to be. That ended up being really important because we were like, oh yeah, look how hard it is to do that. Oh, you need to allow extra time for making your voice clip fit your image that you want it to match onto. Then we moved into the narrative arc. So in humanities, I thought that was a really important place to start for 100 level classes. They might not have, been familiar with a narrative arc. We watched several examples from the Digital Story Archive, brainstormed personal connections with the global. We did light research with an annotated bibliography. That was my students' least favorite assignment. And then we spent at least one, I can't remember, maybe we had 2 weeks where we were just addressing tech challenges as they were generating their digital stories. That must have come after they did their storyboarding though, because we did storyboarding so they could map out what they were actually going to talk about, how they were going to incorporate that research that they had done. We had a week of peer review, and then we had a final screening at the end of the term. So this is quite different from the way that Aaron did it in his class. In my class, this was integrated into the broader theme of the assignment. It was a major assignment. It wasn't the whole point of the class. It sort of just fit into the class.
Okay. In my class, we started out with an introduction to digital story because some of the students may not have had any experience with digital storytelling. We talked about things like the story circle process, which is a common process that is advocated by the Story Center, and so we talked a little bit about that kind of brainstorming type process. And then they worked on very short 2 or 3 minute introduction video projects. And so we worked on that together. I showed them an example of just introducing yourself, and they made these 2 or 3 minute videos, which gave them kind of the foundational skills that they could build on throughout the term. So I think the Friday of the second week, we had these kind of 2 or 3 minute, which was a great kind of way for students to introduce themselves to others in the class, as well as kind of learn these foundational skills. After that, each week was designated to a certain set of kind of important issues in digital storytelling. Copyright and image use was something that we did quite early. Because I didn't want them to start getting assets that they weren't able to utilize in their final projects. We talked about transitions and green screens, and you can do green screens using WeVideo, and we did do some kind of small green screen projects as part of the class as well, just to kind of experiment with that. We talked about sound, of course, both music, background music, voiceover, sound effects, those types of things. And So those were covered mainly on like Mondays and Wednesdays, and then on Fridays would be kind of a workshop session where it's like, okay, we just covered all of this material this week. How does this apply in your particular project? And so the students were working together in order to think about and brainstorm about ways that they might utilize these different aspects in their project. Towards the end of the project, when they were kind of really into the hard work of making their final projects, we actually kind of did some had some online speakers come in. We went to the podcast studio to think about things like, when do you not want to use a digital story? When might a podcast be a better form of media in order for you to get your message across than things that had lots of pictures? And so we started to talk about those types of things. Monuments, we had a group called Confluence, which is setting up a series of monuments along the Columbia River system that reference the native groups at that kind of confluence area. And so we were talking about, well, how could that be used with digital story? You know, maybe a QR code at the monument site, and then people could reference digital stories. I had, as we'll see, I had one student that was really interested in kind of Native American stuff, and so we had that discussion with the Confluence group. And then we went to the virtual reality lab, and we played around with virtual reality to think about maybe that's kind of like a next step in kind of digital storytelling, and in what instances might virtual reality be a really useful kind of add-on in order to help better tell this story. Then at the end of term for the final, we had a final screening. That screening included a peer review or a peer grading. And so I had a Google form that had 5 different criteria, and so they rated their classmates, and then they had an opportunity to make comments about what they liked, what they didn't like, what worked, what didn't work, those types of things. And then I was able to use that as kind of a starting point as I graded the projects at the end of the term. Yeah, and again, the Fridays were just that workshop day when they were able to really apply everything that we were learning to their particular project.
Okay, so here is what students said about the projects. So first, for our data collection, we arranged to collect consent forms from each other's classes. We really didn't want students to feel pressure that if we were collecting consent forms, they would sort of know or think that their grade was going to be affected by whether they participated in the data collection. So we did that before the end of term, and then after grades were submitted, we were able to see, okay, who participated and which videos we could include in our analysis. We did a fairly short survey using Google Forms over regarding their satisfaction with WeVideo as a platform, so with that software as service itself, and then regarding the project as a whole in terms of the skills and competencies that they built in class. And then after the course was done and grades were submitted, we reviewed their digital stories to look for kind of the themes that we saw were happening in what they created. So what the student said, the question here says, do you think WeVideo is an effective tool for helping you learn about the subject matter of your video? So the majority of them said yes. It seemed like they thought this was a good way to engage with the content. 83%. We did have a pretty low N, right? There are only 6 people participating in this survey, so that's something to take into account. Here we have how satisfied were you with the capabilities of WeVideo for the purposes of completing the video assignment. So 1 is not satisfied at all, and 5 is very satisfied. So you can see that students themselves are kind of spread out in terms of what they think of WeVideo. I think this might be, here's me putting my take on it, it might be related to students' own previous experiences with technology. If they were more experienced, they were more likely to see the problems in WeVideo. Like they want to do more creative things that WeVideo doesn't allow. And what do you wish you could do with WeVideo? So here's where the challenges really came out. They wish that it allowed all clips to have transitions. There is some clunkiness in how the images would transition into the next one. Clunkiness with the software taking a long time to load. If they were working with low bandwidth, depending on where they were doing their work, they needed a really strong internet connection and different hardware. Yeah, so if they had an older computer, and actually the Wi-Fi at EOU is pretty slow, so even in my class, they might have a hard time getting their photos to upload into the platform. The way that text overlays on the images was also kind of clunky. So when you add text, you had to do it just to one image, and it wouldn't overlap onto following slides. So that was kind of tedious for them if they wanted text to align with several images. They had to do it for each individual image. And then they wanted easier formatting for words and quotes. So that was also a little bit clunky in terms of the software. Is this yours?
Yep. Okay. So I say this is still kind of like the 83%. The question is, do you think this project increased your comfort level with using technology? And I would say 83% kind of said, yeah, it did, more or less. We have the strong 50%, and then we have the other group there that says, yeah, it did, but it was still really clunky and it didn't help that much because it's pretty basic, and that's one of the things that we'll talk about in a little bit. And there was one naysayer in this group that was like, I don't like this at all. So, okay, next slide. We tried to get a little bit more nuance on in developing your WeVideo to what degree you feel you were able to do certain things like learn about your content, practice creativity, evaluate sources for relevant and credible evidence, understand the influence on your topic, think about your topic from different perspectives. And these trended towards the strong side, purple or 5 being very much so. And blue, not at all. So we have no blues at all, so no, not at all. So they kind of trend towards the strong side, but not in all cases equally. Okay, you want to be good cop or bad cop on this one? This is the one where we always get muddled up. Can I be good cop, right? Okay, so the affordances and challenges of using WeVideo. One of the affordances is because it's web-based, there's no need for kind of maintaining specific hardware. As I said, even I have done digital storytelling assignments in classes since before laptops and iPads were very, very accessible. And so, of course, those were done in labs. And you would think that they would all be uniform, but there is really some problems where one student would be working in the lab and they're like, I can't do this, right? And everyone else was able to do it because one computer would be problematic for some reason. Later in my trajectory of doing digital storytelling projects, I actually got a bunch of iPads, and I had iMovie iOS app on iPads. And I said, great, all the same iPads, all the same software, right? No, you don't do one update, and all of a sudden there's one student that can't do something at the time that they're doing it, or they have to do this update or something like that. So there is this kind of group of hardware problems that kind of come along. And so we were, oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm not actually, because we were thinking that going to that with WeVideo would help, but.
Yeah, but it turned out not to be as smooth as we were hoping. So for example, I think Aaron mentioned that you could use WeVideo on your phone or on an iPad. But if you started on an iPad or a phone, which I had students who did so, you couldn't switch from the iPad to a computer and then back again. So there are some things that you couldn't do on the iPad, so you'd have to, access it through an actual laptop or a computer, and then you couldn't go back and do it on your own iPad. So I had one student that's what he used. It's also, I would say, not super robust, right? I think this is true for anything that you go to access, like, for example, Google Sites, right? It's meant to be easy to access, and so it's really kind of pared down to the bare minimum. Digital storytelling in general has been used more in K through 12 settings, and I think WeVideo is a really good kind of platform for those lower levels. And then, of course, assessment. Anytime you're doing a creative project, because of the difficulties in the software, it's like, are you assessing their storytelling, which is, what was really the emphasis in my class, or are you assessing their technical skills? As somebody who, like Steve said, I'm kind of resisting my own phobia, my own tendency to use pencil and paper. I can see that it can be challenging for students who aren't really adept at trying those new things. But it does encourage creativity, right? Okay, so now is, I think, the more fun part. So we're going to show a couple of projects, or I'm going to show two from my class. My class generated much shorter projects than Aaron's, so I'm going to show two. This first one does not have a title, so I'm just going to let it play, and then I'll say a few words afterwards.
There once was a girl who struggled with connecting to her identity because she didn't know where she came from. This girl knew she was Native American, but she didn't know what tribe she was from or where her tribe was located. She would ask her dad where they came from, but he couldn't tell her because he was adopted and he didn't know any of that information, which led to her feeling disconnected from her identity and her culture. My dad found his birth mother, and with that, he also learned that we are part of a Canadian tribe called Quedaka Nation. It is located in Prince George, British Columbia. When I started college, it was an opportunity for me to do more research on my culture and my tribe. With this research, I was able to find out that I can enroll as a Native American in my Indian tribe, but I have to be a descendant of someone who is previously or currently registered. Native Americans see far more racial discrimination than anyone else. Whether it's applying for a job, going to the clinic for help, or interacting with the police, Native Americans are racially discriminated against in any situation. This is why I think it's important for Native Americans to be registered or enrolled in their tribe, because all this racial discrimination is doing something to Native Americans' identity in society and how they are viewed in today's world. My research has really helped me to decide whether or not I want to personally apply or enroll. But I need to talk to my dad and I need to talk to my family in Canada, but I'm hoping that one day that can happen. One thing that I think people who are non-natives can do is change their views on how Native Americans are looked at and how they are portrayed in society and in history.
Okay, so I'm so proud of this student because this just last month she actually gave a talk at the Native American art exhibit that we did with Spelia and the Native American Arts Fund, Native American Arts Fund. And I think this was kind of a starting point for her. Of course, she, maybe not a starting point, but it was along her journey to discovering this identity, connecting with her tribal heritage. And in this project, she was able to kind of tie together things that we were talking about in class and build her presentation skills that then she was able to actually put into practice at the art exhibit last month. Okay, the next one is very different.
I grew up on a farm in eastern Washington, so the agricultural industry has been a part of my life since the beginning. Growing up on a farm taught me how to work hard with a good work ethic. I've learned a lot of new life skills that have helped me throughout my life as I try to conquer. As a kid, I never took the time to step back and see farming as a whole. All I knew was that my dad needed my help and I had to go help him. As I got older, I realized that I was part of a much larger scale than I thought I was. The wheat that my dad and I were working hard to grow and produce was being shipped worldwide. Realizing that I was part of a global production scared me, almost to the point where I didn't know what I wanted to do. To be a part of something that big, I didn't know if I could handle the challenge. Entering high school, I began to do more research in the global aspect of agriculture, looking at world events, USDA reports for both the United States and Brazil, harvest yields, and weather events in Australia. I did this because all of these affected me, not so much back then as I do now, because world events can either improve or destroy the market. Trying to understand the markets and how global events affect certain aspects of my operation took time. I was lucky enough to be able to attend meetings and seminars at a young age. Back then, they didn't make much sense to me, but it wasn't until later in life that I figured out what they were talking about and why it was important. In my junior year of high school, I realized that I didn't know what I wanted to do. This is where I began to ponder my thoughts and think about who I was. I realized that I couldn't just drop agriculture because it was a huge part of my life, and without it, I wouldn't be able to find myself. This left me with two choices: come back to the farm or go work for another company inside the agricultural sector. I began to look more into the global markets to see what was affecting them. Turns out everything is. When somewhere in the world is having a bad year like a drought or extreme weather events, the market will fluctuate. It's completely the opposite for when it's a good year, because nobody knows what to do. This will cause the market to be at a standstill and will eventually hurt the economy. Still thinking about what I wanted to do, I began to ask more questions. I would ask my dad and grandpa more questions about their connection with farming and why they stayed with it. During meetings and crop tours, at the end when question time came, I always had a few questions for them to answer about certain aspects of their presentations. I started to feel my connection with ag culture really branch out to a point where I would be talking about farm reports and the weather and not even realize it. It was a habit I always had, but it never occurred to me how much I did it. People would always tell me, "That's your farmer bone in ya. It's a good thing to have." I would always laugh with them and tell them thanks, but now I know what they really meant. Gathering my thoughts and everyone's advice, I compiled it all together and came to the conclusion that I couldn't leave the agricultural world, because it had already brought me so much to my life. Why would I give up on something that has helped guide me through my life so far? I came to the decision that I would stay on the family's farm to help keep feeding the world. Currently, I'm getting my bachelor's degree in agricultural sciences from Oregon State University, where I am expanding my knowledge in wheat production and global wheat marketing. I plan on returning to the farm upon graduation to incorporate my knowledge with the ground to produce wheat for people all over the world.
Okay, so you can see how this one is different from the other one, but it equally allowed this student to connect his personal passions, things that he was interested in, and to see how his own individual life here, or to think about his life on the farm, actually connects to these global markets. I don't know how to move from. Haha, there it goes. All right. I'll just say that this
There are
one is from
times in
Erin's
life.
class, and so it's very different and quite a bit longer than the ones from my class.
Where everybody doubts themselves. Am I smart enough to be in this class? I don't belong here. Do they even like me? Doubt is not all bad, however. It can serve as an awareness tool that can aid a person in reevaluating their situations in life. But what happens when that feeling of self-doubt and unworthiness become a little too persistent? When low self-esteem, anxiety, and depression begin to stack on top of this feeling that you don't belong anywhere and are undeserving of all your successes.
Such feelings are commonly associated with a psychological phenomenon known as imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is a mental condition in which an individual believes that all their life successes and accomplishments have been due to chance, luck, or manipulation, and not due to their own merit, despite blatant evidence otherwise. The mental phenomenon was first introduced in the 70s by researcher Pauline Clance.
During their psychological research, Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes conducted interviews with high-achieving women in the workforce, all with PhDs and numerous degrees. Clance noted that a majority of the women shared similar perspectives regarding their successes. They all believed that they had simply fooled everyone around them or luckily landed into their work positions and didn't actually belong there. Such sentiments led Clance into developing the term imposter syndrome. After Clance's work in the 70s, researchers have focused on the ways in which imposter syndrome develops within the female population, especially females who are in STEM fields, which include science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Since then, it has become a norm to associate imposter syndrome with the female population. Until now. In a research study consisting of various undergraduate students located at Eastern Oregon University, a total of 180 students took part in a study measuring imposter syndrome between gender, male or female, and major type, STEM or non-STEM. Results based on the participants' responses to the Clance IP scale, an imposter syndrome scale developed by Pauline Clance, demonstrated that regardless of the major or gender of participants, over 75% of participants suffered from what would be considered moderate to intense imposter syndrome feelings. These findings demonstrated that imposter syndrome is no longer limited to female and STEM populations and is spreading to other groups within society. I was granted the opportunity to meet and talk with current undergraduates at EOU. Here are some of their stories.
My name is Nicholas Visi. I'm a current undergraduate at EOU. I'm studying psychology and theater performance as a double major with a minor in music as well.
My name is Cheyenne, and I am getting a degree in psychology and with a minor in sociology and anthropology.
Would you describe yourself as having imposter syndrome?
No, I would say that I'm probably as far away from an imposter as you can get.
Oh, yes. Well, I think college is a huge thing because I'm a first generation college student. And so I oftentimes just feel this pressure to succeed and these expectations set on me, and having that, like, those expectations from my family, but then also the fear of not succeeding or the fear that I'm going to fail is the biggest thing.
When you do something successfully, whether it be being accepted into a university or getting an A on an exam, what do you attribute that success to?
Usually my own preparation. I think that in my fields, such as theater, a lot of time goes into the prep work. We spend hours rehearsing. And in psychology, I spend hours studying. And at least for me, I can see that. I have a track of the time that I've spent doing it, so I can recognize that I've spent the time, I've done the work, and then I've succeeded at the task.
Oftentimes I say that it's luck. Oftentimes just regard all of the work that I put into trying to do that, and just say that it's luck, or if it's a group thing, then it's the other people in the group and not me.
When nervousness does arise, let's say for a test, what things do you tell yourself in order to boost confidence or to eliminate self-doubt about your successes?
I think it's very similar. It has to do with my preparation. I can say, I'm nervous for this test. I've got this big thing coming up, it's half my grade or more. This is the big one. And then I can look back and say, I've been studying for 2 hours a day. I know when I've been studying. I know what I've been studying. I've been doing the work. And maybe also I look back at my other grades in the class. If I've got a big test, I've had a few quizzes. I've gotten the 95s on the quiz. It stands to reason that I will likely do just as good on the exam.
On a scale from 1 to 10, how confident are you in your mental capabilities?
I'd say probably an 8.5 or 9. I don't think someone can say 10. I think that's a little bit unrealistic. I think there's things that I think I know that I don't know, but I think I know what I know quite a bit.
6. A lot of the time I just struggle with having confidence in myself and my ability to succeed in specifically school, but also in a work environment or with other people.
On a scale from 1 to 10, how much do you feel like you belong within your current social group?
Probably slightly lower, 6 or 7. I'm not the most social of persons. I've struggled somewhat socially in my youth and my upbringing, but I don't think that detracts from my abilities within my station.
I'd probably say a 7. I think for that one, it's just the fact that I feel there are so many ways I feel different than my social group.
On a scale from 1 to 10, how deserving do you think you are of your achievements?
Probably a 9 or 10. I work for them. I can see my work. I've told you, I can see my work. I see where it goes. I see where it comes from. And then my accomplishments happen.
I would probably also say 7 again. Dang, this one's okay. Yeah, I'd say 7 because I think that I have definitely struggled a lot and worked very hard to succeed and to get to where I am and to get the accomplishments that I have gotten. I think that there are still so many things that I struggle with and so many things that I couldn't have done without the help of someone else or the help of other accommodations and other things. And so I can't say that all of my accomplishments have been all me.
What is one thing you wish people knew about imposter syndrome, or what you experience with imposter syndrome?
I would say simply that it's not something to be ashamed of, and that there are so many ways that you can contradict what your brain is telling you instead of believing it. Internally, your brain is telling you that you weren't good enough, or that you weren't, like, there are so many things that are focused on instead of the fact that you succeeded and that you got to where you were because of your hard work. And instead your brain is telling you that you are not good enough, or that you are going to fail, or like it's just an internal fight constantly.
Despite its growing prevalence, imposter syndrome is not formally recognized as a disorder within any psychological diagnostic material. However, with the ways in which imposter syndrome is plaguing our society, a formal diagnosis may be on the horizon.
So that student was a psychology student, major, who had just completed, or was in the final moments of completing a capstone project on imposter syndrome, where they had done a survey with the entirety of the student body at EOU. And so this project allowed her an opportunity to create, or maybe recreate, recontextualize that research in another format that allowed them to make it more accessible than a academic paper or something like that, as well as learning those skills. Okay.
So I'm going to go through these next ones pretty quickly in the name of time. Most students did not have a hard time coming up with something to do a story on. Here are some of the other themes that students did. I actually had two that talked about agriculture, because I had two ag students in my class. Recognizing problems with global nonprofits, sports as a personal connection to the global. He was an athlete, continually traveling with his teams. I did have one student who didn't complete his video. He had a harder time. I think he was having a hard time both with the tech and with the assignment that asked him to take his personal story and connect it globally. That was kind of challenging for him.
Other projects that I had in my class, of course, the ongoing recently completed capstone research was the one that you just saw. I had another student, anthropology major, that was involved in a local musical project, trying to get instruments and equipment, recording equipment available for people to get their music more widely spread. I had one on Dungeons and Dragons. I know we have some Dungeons and Dragons fans in the audience, but was really looking at kind of the community building aspects of Dungeons and Dragons, especially in COVID. They had found an article that talked about how role-playing games were really community building aspects during the COVID, and that there was perhaps maybe even a rebirth or more attention given to role-playing games. And then, of course, that one that I already talked about, where the student did a project on the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. Okay, this is largely just our invitation for questions and conversation. These are some things that we think are useful with regard to digital storytelling for different types of classes. They can be theme-driven classes. They could be capstone-oriented in some way. Cutting down to the bottom here, we think it's really important that this can be used at almost any point in a student's trajectory, right? In the case of Jenny's classes, they were kind of lower division classes, kind of maybe formulating ideas that the agricultural entrepreneurship student might do, or someone that might go on to Native American studies or something like that. In mine, it's like more recontextualizing projects that they already have in the works, right? Another question that we have is, what could we do with these, right? Could we have like a film screening at some spring symposium, right? Or maybe could we make a repository of these EOU-oriented digital stories in the library? And or might it be useful for the Eastern Oregon Film Festival or some sort of event aligned with the Eastern Oregon Film Festival or the Film Studies minor that we're working on. And with that, we'd like to open it up to any comments, questions.
Well, let's first of all thank our speakers. Questions, yes.
Hi, I have 3 short questions. One is, given the feedback on WeVideo, are you wedded to keep using that? That's one question.
Well, we do still have access to it through the end of the year. Can I go to my next slide? Like, if you want to practice using WeVideo, I'm going to be using it probably in my winter course and in my spring humanities course again. So at least through the end of this year, you know, I've learned a lot, and maybe there's room for growth both on my end and like how I can implement WeVideo. I wouldn't say I am especially tied to it. Thanks, guys. You know, if there's something better or free that, you know, that comes along, I would definitely, or if somebody donates, like, I don't know, 20 new iPads or something like that, and we can use the iMovie. When I tried to use iMovie over Summer Bridge, the first time I did digital storytelling, that's when I had all those hardware, or not hardware exactly, update issues, and you know, some of them were locked. It was really stressful. And this, I would say, at least was better.
Great. Second question is, where is the story center that you mentioned? Okay, and last question is, when do you have to do the IMB if I'm using digital storytelling project just in my class and not disseminating outside my class? Do I need to do so?
IRB?
Yeah, I'm sorry, IRB.
Probably not if it's just for educational purposes. But in this case, the psychology student wanted to use this video potentially, or some a more refined version of it as part of applications for grad school, that type of thing. She also wanted to go into like school counseling and school psychologist work, and so she was talking a lot about the potential of using these skills as part of that. So she went through it. The student that was interested in Native American studies, I had suggested doing an IRB so that they could do interviews with people at the Confederated Tribes, but that student wasn't able to get through that process in like 10 weeks and make contact with people in the tribes, and so it can be problematic. And so that work was more historical work, not kind of like an ethnographic work. There were no interviews in the project for that exact reason.
But if you're not having them do that kind of research, you know, like in my classes, they didn't do interviews. They could have done an interview, but even then, I don't know. It didn't. If it's just for class, I don't think you need IRB. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Did you go to the slide where you kind of break down how you incorporated all this stuff into your course weekly topics? Sorry. I think you had it back to back. Yeah, here we go. So this is yours, Aaron. No, this is
me.
Jenny's, and then next one is yours. So it sounds like the way you were incorporating it, Aaron, is much more about the technical pieces of using the software web. And then for Jenny, it was subject matter attached to how the different aspects of this software can be used. I guess if one were wanting to incorporate this in, what would be a suggestion from you guys about, should you lead with the technical aspect of the should you lead with the software, or you should lead with the subject matter?
Personally, I think that depends on your goals for the class, right? Like in my class, I very much looked at it as a tool for students to, like, okay, I want to have them write a term paper, but why are you having them write a term paper? Like, what are the course outcomes that you're trying to get them to complete? So I would start there, right? And so in my class, it was very much just a way to have them connect their local experience, their personal, with a global kind of perspective. And I think the digital storytelling was a really nice way to do that. And I didn't want them to write a term paper, right? Like, I had other papers that I was grading, so this was a really nice way for them to engage with the course content. But I think Aaron...
It's always a balancing act, right? You're trying to do both things. But it also matters, how much time do you have, right? Because mine was a 3-credit class. Hers was a 4-credit class. I teach a 5-credit class, Media, Self, and Society, where I have digital storytelling projects. But we're also looking at major media theories, the Birmingham School Media Theory, Frankfurt School Media Theory, and some really kind of heavy text that we are able to do. I can do that in a 5-credit class. I can't do it in a 3-credit class, right? And so you need to think about the structure of your class, what you're doing in that class, and then strike that balance depending on what's most appropriate for your particular class.
And Aaron's students, like, most of them already had a project, right? So they were really taking a project and revisioning it as a digital story. And so, like, they already had their content. My students are lower division, they're just getting started, so they had to generate those ideas first. Yeah, so I think it really depends what you want to do. Of course, I think my way was better.
She did all the work anyway, so.
Are there any other questions?
I was wondering if students submitted drafts or outlines or what?
Yeah, and actually that was one of I think one of the challenges with WeVideo, because the way that the platform is set up, like, students could submit to, there's like a class base. It's really formatted for work in classes, but after they submit, they don't have access to it anymore, and you can't send it back to them. So we had to do a new way where they just shared it, so that it wasn't submitted. And we learned that, I think, kind of the hard way, that, oh, well, you submitted it and now I can't send it back to you to revise it.
I learned that with those intro projects that I talked about.
Yeah. It was really frustrating. Like, why wouldn't they build in a review space?
I just had that problem with Laserfish. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I'm sorry that Dean Lau left, because we had some gratitude here. I actually started thinking about using WeVideo in like 2015. In the Deep Stories collection that Steve mentioned, I actually have in the final chapter of that, I say, this would be a great way to like extend on digital storytelling practice. And that was published in 2017. So I was already thinking about it, but I really didn't get the chance to do it until COVID came. And I was set to teach that Media, Self, and Society class. And I was like, how am I going to teach this class when we can't meet to do these workshops? And so I worked with the college to try and get it then. We couldn't quite get it at that point because of how much time we had. And so that's when Jenny and I connected, and we said, hey, why don't we try this as kind of an experimental one-off, right, and see how it works out. And he's been really, really supportive as he can be in order to do that. As we said, we still have WeVideo access, so if you're interested in just playing around with it or learning about it, then please do.
There's room for 20 users, so that includes the instructor and the classes. So the way that Aaron and I did it was we set up, we had Auburn set up an email that we would both receive, and then we each have our, as administrator, yeah, and then we both have both instructor roles and student roles so that we could play around with it, right? I wanted to see what it looked like as a student. And because we had such low enrollment, don't say that too loud, it was actually, it was nice, right? So we didn't run out of spots.
All right, well, we're about 6 minutes over, so I think we should call it there, but they may
Thanks
stick
again,
around if you have
everybody.
questions afterward. Let's thank our speakers again.